Hello, book lovers, and welcome to the 89th episode of Authors Love Bookstores from a Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Joe Moldover. I am here with you every week with my friend and partner, Kimberly Hensel-Lorance, moving across North America, Canada, and the United Kingdom and interviewing authors and the independent bookstores they love. This week, we are in Sonoma, California, with Andy Weinberger and Jude Sales of Readers Books. Andy and Jude, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi. Thank you.
Delighted to see you both. For the audience, Andy Weinberger is the author of the Amos Parisman Mysteries and a collection of essays, The Ugly Man Sits in the Garden, Pieces of a Life. Since 1991, he has owned and operated Readers Books, an independent bookstore in Sonoma, California. Andy lives in Sonoma, where he divides his time between bookselling and writing. The most recent edition of the Amos Parisman Mysteries, the third in the set, is titled The Kindness of Strangers, and it drops April 12th. Andy, congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
Jude Sales is here with Andy as well, a longtime friend and the book buyer at Readers Books. Jude, welcome, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Great. So to the audience, thank you for being here. We remind you that Authors Love Bookstores exist to support independent booksellers through the COVID pandemic and beyond. So we're going to be dropping links in the chat. We encourage you to head on over to Readers Books and pick something up. Ideally, an Amos Parisman mystery. You can pre-order The Kindness of Strangers there now. Andy, for those who don't know, I'm going to get us started by asking you to make an introduction. And Amos Parisman has been described as a little Philip Marlowe mixed with a pinch of Larry David, which is a wonderful description. But tell us a little bit more about this guy.
Amos Parisman's sort of a composite figure based on my dad and some uncles and some other irascible Jews I've known growing up in LA. Working class guy, not particularly devout. He doesn't believe in God. He believes in justice, which is I guess a form of God. And he's been at it for a long time. He's a very no nonsense kind of fellow, and he's I don't know how great a detective he is. He's more of a philosopher, really, when it comes right down to it. But he asks a lot of questions, and that kind of endless curiosity and wondering why somebody does something or would do something. It's not a Sherlock Holmesy kind of detective where you're picking up a clue and that from that evidence that leads to something else. It's not. In fact, the books. I think in terms of mysteries, I think the mystery angle is it's just a coat hanger that I hang the whole story on. It's really about the characters that I'm interested in. If the characters are I want you to fall in love with the characters, basically. And if you love the characters and you want to root for the characters, then the book is worth reading. In my years as a bookseller, I've read a number of books, and I've decided that I don't care if the book is well written, if it's well plotted. If I don't like the characters, if I don't care what happens to those characters, I'm not going to read it. I'm just not going to read it. I don't care. So that he's somebody you can care about, hopefully.
I love the idea that, the mystery is sort of this frame that you can hang the characters on, or a frame to sort of meet the characters. Mm-hmm. Tell me why mysteries? Are you a lifelong mystery fan? Why is that the frame that you chose?
Why did I choose that? Well, I actually started writing this. It was a whimsical thing. What happened? We were living up in Sonoma, and my wife got a very significant job in LA, and it required moving there. And so we moved down there, and I had, by the time this happened in 2014, 2015, we had developed a really good team of people to work at the bookstore. So essentially, we could run without me. I sort of talked myself out of a job, is what happened. And we went down there, and I ended up on the 9th floor of a 12-story apartment building in Park La Brea, which is a district in Midtown Los Angeles, with nothing to do except to think about what to make for dinner when my wife came home, and I was bored. And so out of that, I started writing again. I had been a writer since the age of 12, but it had gone in fits and starts. And at one point, I almost got published in the 80s, and that fell apart. And then I decided that wasn't what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I joined a klezmer band, and I did other things, and I was having fun. And then all of a sudden, we were back in the book business after many, many years. So we'd always been around books, but now I found a lot of free time in LA to write, and I started writing, and out of that came Amos Parisman. Now, why it's a mystery, I don't know.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. I love it. That's great. It's a great origin story. Jude, let me come to you. So you're the book buyer for Reader's Books.
Right.
And many of the people who watch our program are writers or aspiring writers, and who hope that their books will be bought. So you're a good source. So I guess first of all, I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit about your background in book buying. Have you always worked in independent book selling? Has this been a long-term career for you? What's your background?
This is a very long-term commitment here. I'm working
She's
on
108 years old, actually.
Doesn't look it.
50 years in the book business.
Okay.
Starting as a clerk who rang up the cash register and put books away, but I've been buying books for probably 30 of those years. And so I feel like I have some experience, and I don't know how it's done. It just happens. It's one of those things. But you have a set way that things work. A sales rep calls you, you have a catalog or something presented, and you choose what feels right. And you have to know your audience. You have to know who it is who's going to walk in the front door. And if you don't, then you're going to end up with a pile of books that just sits there and nothing happens.
Well, let me ask you both. I mean, so you're both veterans of the book business in various ways, and we were talking about this a little bit before we came on air. But Reader's Books goes back to 1991. So you've been through a lot. I mean, we were saying before that the challenge at the beginning were the big box bookstores, Barnes and Noble and Borders and places like that. And then, of course, there was the rise of online retail and Amazon. And then in recent years, we've been through the COVID pandemic and the challenges that that's involved.
Mhm.
What has been sort of the greatest challenge over that long arc, and what's the secret to staying open?
I'll speak to that. I think that it is getting people aware that local is important.
Mhm.
That if you don't buy local, you won't have a bookstore. And I don't care if your local is got 5 books in it, you still need to support that store and make sure that that's your priority, is that you're spending your money where you want to see that store remain. And we have finally broken that glass ceiling or whatever it is. We have a very, very loyal following of people who come to us on a weekly basis. And those customers are bread and butter. That's how we can stay in business.
Yeah, I used to I write these essays every week, and that's how that first book came about, and talking about the book business and stuff. And I used to liken it to watering a garden. That if people come to live in Sonoma because they think it's a beautiful place, it's this idyllic town, and if they want the town to be there the amenities of the town, you have to support the amenities, and you can't shop in another town and expect there to still be a little bookstore there, as among other things. And so we've been beating that drum for 30 years, and it's been very successful. It's particularly during the COVID period, but even before, there was, I don't know if you know, there was a series of fires in Northern California that were pretty dreadful, and there was this sign that went up all over town, Sonoma strong, and everybody stood by their businesses that were still standing after that, and the National Guard had come through and all of that. And it really meant something when people would say, "How are you?" meet you in a market and say, "How are you?" They really wanted to know how you were, because you might have lost your house. I have friends who lost their houses and or died. It had some meaning to it. And I remember there was a lady that has a fancy eyeglass place around the corner, and we went in there after a long time, and I said, "How's business?" And she says, "You're the first person I've seen in a month." And I said, "Well, I'm going to make your day," and I bought a very fancy pair of glasses from her. But
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that goes on. So.
Well, I want to remind the audience we're talking about supporting local and supporting indie booksellers, and you can do that right now by clicking on the links in the chat to go to Reader's Books and order books online. If you haven't read Amos Parisman already, Book 1, An Old Man's Game, Book 2, Reason to Kill are available, and you can pre-order Book 3, The Kindness of Strangers.
Good.
Andy, we have an audience question for you. Rebecca would like to know a little bit about your research process. Maybe specifically for this most recent book, but I think in general, as you're writing these mysteries, what is your process? How do you do your research?
I don't do research, frankly. There are people who write, they block things out with outlines, and they do research, and they read histories of this, that, and the other. And then there are people like me who write, they're the seat of the pants kind of people. I get up. I don't write things that I have previously plotted. I remember hearing E.L. Doctorow talk about this once, and he said to him, writing a novel is like driving a car down a mountain road on a foggy night, and you can only see like 30 feet in front of you, but you get that 30 feet done, and then the next night you do another 30 feet, and then eventually you get down the mountain, and you don't know. At least I don't know where this book goes. I honestly don't. I know where I'm starting from, and I know there may be characters that I want to bulk up a little bit, or a scene that I want to add some description to. But where it goes is when I sit down in the afternoon, that's what happens.
Yeah, it's amazing to me for a mystery writer. So I've heard that Doctorow quote before, and it's a great quote. But I never, and I sort of understand it for somebody who's maybe writing in a different genre. But I mean, as a mystery writer, I mean, you must know at the beginning, sort of who did it and how they did it, and or no, you're just discovering it as you go.
Not at all.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I recently tried writing a book that was not a mystery. I've done 6 of these books now. I've got 3 more waiting in the wings, and I'm working on now a 7th Amos Parisman. But I stopped and wrote, I don't know, 100 pages of a book. And I said, I'll do something that's not a mystery, that's not present tense, that's not written in the first person, which is what Amos Parisman is. And I tried and I tried and I tried. It just didn't feel good. It just didn't feel kind of, and it was based on research and thought, and the heck with it.
It's amazing.
It didn't feel good.
Jude, I have a question for you. And I always love it when we get book buyers on the program, especially people who've been around for a while, because again, I mean, many of the people who are interested in our show, who watch our show, are themselves writers and aspiring writers, and we all want you to crack the code. And I guess I would frame it this way. In sort of the mystery of sort of what achieves publishing success and what does not, and what breaks out and what gets lost. Do you see it coming? Does it surprise you? Do you shape it at all by making tastes in your community? Are you just kind of riding the wave like the rest of us? I mean, what do you think?
I guess it is wave riding for the most part. However, we have years of background, and you have authors who are going to work, and we get advanced readers copies, and sometimes an early read will push a button. There are books that if I read it and I hand it to somebody else and they like it, and then it'll make the whole rounds of the bookstore. And if we're all behind something, you can rest assured we're going to pile it up, because if someone's going to ask for it, then, or ask us what it is, if 5 or 6 different people are all going to point them at the same book,
Yeah.
that's going to work.
Yeah.
And there have been that kind of groundswell books, but more often than not, you're going by gut, and you're going by who your audience is. And a strong character is always going to win over a plot, unless it's somebody that is just plot driven.
Yeah.
And you have to go with what your community is looking for. And you also have particular customers who will buy this, and who may in fact be people who recommend to other friends. So you're thinking ahead.
Have you? This is sort of maybe an unfair question, but because it's out of left field. But I wonder if there's been a book that just sort of exploded with success that you just did not see coming. That the success was a complete surprise to you. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, there are some that are book club driven, those TV book clubs and TikTok things that take off that I am not aware of until somebody tells me. I'm seeing steady sales, and then suddenly I'm thinking, I need 6 of this, not 2.
Right.
Because you're reordering several times a week, and there are those that just come out of nowhere. And
can I also jump in? There have been the times when the publisher has no idea what they have.
That's right.
They publish. They have their own buying network of people and choosing people. I remember years and years ago going at the ABA convention, going up. We'd read Galley of Angela's Ashes, Frank McCourt, and I read it and I wept. And I gave it to my wife, and she read it and wept. And we thought, oh, this book is going to the moon, And I walked up to the Simon & Schuster booth, and I said, you've got a winner here, And she said, oh yeah, it's a nice little Irish biography. They thought it was going to be a small audience for people in Boston, Irish descent in Boston. They didn't even do a big print run of it.
Yeah.
And I think we bought 2 or 3 cases of it, which for a little bookstore like ours is a huge bet. And I think we sold like 300 copies of that book, which is crazy. They had no idea. So it's always in contrast, who's that? There was a Jay Leno biography or autobiography years ago that Warner or one of those people printed like 600,000 copies because they said, "Oh, Jay Leno, he's going to be something."
Right.
And they returned 490,000 to be remaindered and turned into compost. So it's always a crapshoot in a lot of ways. You're betting on the jockey, or you're betting on the horse, or it's a bet. and you have to use your intuition and what you know.
Yeah, that Angela's Ashes example is such a great example. And for anyone who hasn't read it, it's obviously a great book. You can get it from Reader's Books by clicking the link in the chat, by the way. A few moments ago, we were talking a little bit about genre, because Andy, you were sort of talking about how you were sort of almost like this intuitive mystery writer, this natural mystery writer. You sort of tried to maybe write something a little bit different. You just keep on coming back. I'm always, sort of very interested in genre in terms of, why, sort of how genre functions for us as writers and how it functions as booksellers, whether it is in some ways is limiting and steering readers away from work that they might otherwise enjoy. And, so I wonder if I could ask you both about that a little bit. And in particular, if over the course of time, you've seen changes in the way that genre seems to function in the bookstore. For example, young adults reading more young adult, science fiction becoming more sort of mainstream. What have you seen in terms of that evolution?
Well, just what you said. The lines are very thinly drawn, and deciding where to put a book in the store it can fluctuate. I'm looking at a catalog copy. I'm reading. I'm saying, okay, this sounds like it's going to go in mystery, and then when the book actually is in my hand, I realize, no, this is going to work better on the fiction table than it is on the mystery table. And young adults tend to stay in the young adult section, but we certainly have an adult crowd who browses that section very regularly. So it sort of pulls that way for the kids, so they have a place where they can go, but there's no longer a hard and fast rule that you don't read over here. This is a young adult section. You're an old adult.
Right.
We're not going to go there. It's much more fluctuating than it used to be. Things are much more fluid. And I say I don't read science fiction, but that's not true. I read lots of books that could cross over, an awful lot of things that you could easily put in that section. But I think I'm reading literary fiction. So,
right. Also, a lot of young adults, or what used to be called children, they're not real. They've grown up a lot faster than you or I ever have. We have a whole section of graphic novels, for example, which are essentially they're adult comic books, but the subject matter is quite adult. There's one out on Putin right now, which I can't sell for some reason, but anyway. But there are books like that young adults gravitate towards. That's where we put Mouse and the Spiegelman stuff, and that are essentially it's adult fiction in a format that younger people can access. So,
Andy, as a writer, do you feel limited by being thought of as a mystery writer, or do you sort of feel like, no, that's my flock, that's where I need to be?
I don't feel limited. I keep coming back to this character who's essentially me, I guess. And he spends the afternoon typing away and blathering and solving things, not really solving things, but moving this mystery along. We've had a lot of people at the store, a lot of famous writers at the store over the years. Laurie King was one of them, who wrote that series about Sherlock Holmes and all that. And she said at one point, I remember that the reason people like mysteries is because they are morality plays, essentially, and that good triumphs over evil, and at the end the world is restored to some form of normalcy and justice, and people, it makes you feel good. that when you've restored it to that point. And if it's not restored to justice, then you don't feel so good. So that's, you know, and this guy is always cogitating on that and wondering about it. And sometimes the end of the mystery, you know, we've solved the mystery. We found the person who did whatever, murder usually, and he either gets off or he goes to an insane asylum, or he's there's some way in which, you know, it's not like a Mickey Spillane thing where you just shoot him down and everything is good. It's not that clear, because I don't think the world is that clear, and I think that good people are capable of doing evil things. You know, that there is evil out in the world, but it's not a cut and dried kind of thing. So,
yeah, that's great. You know, you mentioned a moment ago sort of having other writers into the store, and Laura King, who's definitely wonderful. You know, one of the things that I miss the most from pre-pandemic times, although I think it's sort of slowly coming back, are the in-person bookstore events, which, you know, I just think there's an energy to those that it's difficult to generate online with online events. I think there's kind of an unpredictability to them sometimes. I think that there's sort of something special about bringing writers who, you know, 99.9% of the time were alone in a room, you know, into direct personal contact with readers. I wonder if for both of you, either one of you, is a jump ball, if there are past events in the store, live in-person events in the store, that come to your mind as especially exciting, unique, bizarre, funny, just sort of the best of what sort of comes to your mind?
go ahead.
I think we had a local author, Emma Klein, who was published by Random House, a big publishing house, and we got to do the launch for her book, and that was very exciting, and that was huge. That was out the door people, and it's always fun when there's so many people that you can't fit them in, because so often you get a local author in and they're three friends of the audience, and we try and pull as much of the staff together to sit down and listen to. It's such a crapshoot. You never really know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But I don't remember anything terribly weird. Okay, you speak.
All right, Andy, go ahead.
I can remember some weird things. Early on, we had John Berendt, who wrote Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil.
Oh yeah.
And he was in town to visit some friends of his, and they said, "Well, can you have an event for him?" And we were fairly new, and so he said, "Oh, sure, we'd love to do that." And nobody had really heard of him, and so he came with his two friends, and I got my parents to come, and my mother grew up in Savannah, as it happens. That was the lure, and there were five of us there, I think. And he did his spiel on Savannah, but I don't know if you read the book, but it's about transvestites and drug use and all kinds of shenanigans that go on in Savannah, which is, you know, this big party town and pretty wild and loose. And my mother grew up there in the 1920s, and in a kind of an Orthodox Jewish setting, and they left in the early 1930s when the Depression hit, and very sheltered environment, but it was Savannah. And she looked at this man and she shook her head. She said, "That's not the Savannah I remember." He laughed. Anyway, I mean, people, you know, there you just get all sorts of folks there. And we've had what was his name? The guy who wrote the Seine, the River Seine, and not Mel.
David Downing?
No, he was another one. Mort Rosenblum, who's actually a war correspondent, or he was. I think he's retired now, but he lived in Paris, and he wrote a book on the life of the Seine, the river, and he wrote a book on chocolate. He's sort of a raconteur, and we took him out to dinner before this thing started, and he drank a number of glasses of wine, and we got up there, and he starts reading, and he's slurring the words, and it's kind of going off the page, and the audience is looking at him and saying, well, we got through it somehow, but
Yeah. I mean, that's
he was 3 sheets to the wind, but it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pull it up. Well, to the audience, the Emma Klein book is in the chats if you want to click through and check out a local author from her local bookstore, as well as Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil.
Mm-hmm.
So check those out. Let's talk books. Let's talk more books. Let's sell some books. I'd love to hear from the two of you what you've been reading recently. What people coming into the store are interested in. And, one thing about being in Sonoma, we talked a little bit before the show, you're in a tourist destination. So you have, your local crowd, but then you also have a tourist crowd. So I'd love to hear a little bit about both what the store is selling these days, what the two of you are just personally excited about these days. We're going to drop the links into the chat. So for the audience, if you hear about something that sounds good that you haven't heard about, click through, go to Reader's Books and pick it up. Do not go to another online outlet that begins with an A. So yeah, either one of you, feel free to go first.
So I've recently, actually almost everybody in the store has recently read Lan Samantha Chang's new novel, The Family Chow. And it's about a Chinese American family in Wisconsin that has a restaurant, and there's a kind of the father dies, and there's a mystery around that. They're a goofy family. They have 3 sons, but it's wonderful for me is that we know Sam Chang, but Lan Samantha Chang, but she, for many years, but she's writing about a Chinese American family, and they're like any other American family with all these idiosyncrasies, and most non-Chinese Americans, I think, have a view of Chinese people as being thus and so, and they're not. They're just, they're full of all these little goofy things that you would think of in a Jewish family or a Russian family or whatever, and these quirks, and she makes them believable and lovable, and you fall in love with these people. Anyway, we're very high on this book. So
fabulous. Family Chow, it's in the chat. Yeah, Jude, what about you?
It's hard. I'm reading ahead. I'm always reading ahead, and looking forward to Emily St. John Mandel's new book called Sea of Tranquility. Now, that's a book that you could maybe put in the science fiction section, but it's really literary fiction. It's one of those that has 4 separate parts, but there's a little bit of time travel involved. There's a little bit of stretching, can I really believe that this is happening? But she does it very, very well. So that one I just finished and really liked. And also the new Geraldine Brooks called Horse is coming probably next month. And that is a historical fiction that is about a famous racehorse that existed. It's true, but it's also the story about the slave who trained that horse and raised that horse and took care of that horse. So it's pre-Civil War slavery, and you're getting some really ugly, real facts and reality checks in there. And then you've got this racehorse story. It's quite fascinating.
Mm.
So those are the two that I'm just have currently read and really enjoyed. But what's selling is Family Chow,
We're
among
selling
others.
it.
It is one of those things where, yes, we all read that book. We all go to it. It's here. You really want to read this. Swimmers by Julia Otsaku, we all read and really liked. It's an Alzheimer's story, and it's also a story of how that affects people close to you. And yet it's a beautifully written novel. It's short. It only takes you an evening to read. It's a good one.
Those are great. We mentioned sort of briefly before coming on air that there may be some times when you sort of in Northern California are not quite on the same wavelength in terms of what's going to be popular and what's going to sell as maybe East Coast based publishers, what their publisher in New York might be pushing or expecting. Do you find that to be the case? Do you find that there's sort of that geographic discrepancy?
Not necessarily geographic. There are certainly books that are reviewed on the East Coast, books that are in the Washington Post, maybe, that are not necessarily being reviewed on the West Coast because of the regionality. But I don't think that there's really so much of that anymore. We're all in the same boat. We're all reading.
Market.
Yeah.
Andy, a little while ago, you just sort of very casually and subtly let drop that while you have, as of next month, 3 successful mysteries in the world, you just happen to have written another 4. So, for all of us,
3 3/4.
yeah, all right. So, so for all of us novelists who are sort of like grinding it out, one page at a time, I guess we're envious. So can you 2 questions. I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna roll this into 2 questions. One is there any secret to productivity that you can share with the writing community? And 2, is there anything that you're willing to tell us about what to expect for Amos Parisman?
Okay. In terms of productivity, I write every day. I go into the store in the morning. I pay some bills. I yell at people. I cut up cardboard boxes, tell a few jokes, and then I go home for lunch, and I'm done with that. Usually, and except for this, which is different. And then I have my lunch, and then I start to write, and I write for the afternoon until I fall asleep. And then until 2 or 3 o'clock, I gotta kind of hit a wall, and then I realize my body's telling me not to keep going. But I'm fine. What's interesting to me about this process, this particular set of this book, it's really one long 1,000, 2,000 page book that I'm writing. Really, is that I wrote other books in the 80s, and like I said, that almost were published. I had an agent and all of that, and they, for one reason or another, they didn't get published, and I'm very grateful for that now, because right now I think if I had published the book that they were high on at that time, I would have to go to a bookstore like my own and stand up there and read something from this book. And then somebody would raise their hand in the middle of the audience and say, "Why does your character do thus and so?" And I would say, how the hell do I know this? First of all, it was 30 years ago. I looked at these books that I wrote, and they were well written, but I have no idea what they were about. They were, and I ground out those words. I had this poet's problem, I would write 2 lines in a day or 3 lines a day. That was perfect, perfect lines. But I don't have that problem anymore. I just write. and there's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of arguing with myself or with my characters arguing, and my characters act in a certain way, and that's what they would say, and it goes wherever it goes. And I'm not I'm not as harsh with them. I don't come down on them. I just let them talk, and let them describe things. It's kind of like writing a sitcom, I think, because the characters, in a Dick Van Dyke show or whatever or the Friends or whatever it is, how these characters are going to behave. I sort of know how my characters behave, and I don't kill those people off. In terms of Amos, what did you say? How long is he going to go on?
Well, no, I was just wondering if there's anything you're willing to share about what we can expect coming up for him.
Well, I have the final one written, and there is a mystery that in the first one there's a lost child in the first one that he in the case that he never solved, that he's still kicking himself about, a cold case, and in that one, the sixth or the seventh one, he ultimately addresses that issue. I thought about, he was getting older and older in each one and more decrepit in each one. And I thought, I have to kind of slow it down, because eventually he'll be riding with one foot in the grave, and that's not gonna fly. So I just have him sort of eternally old, and of some he's in a range of late 60s to mid to late 70s. I don't know, somewhere in there. We don't get into the actual number. It's an undisclosed number.
Right. That's wonderful. We are running down on time. There's a final question that we always pose on this show, and I want to put it to the two of you. And you can either answer each individually or together or however you want to. But we always want to know, running a successful independent bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part what else?
Go ahead.
Having fun.
Having fun. That's great. I love that.
At Christmas time, I buy pizza for everyone. We have a pizza party on the 23rd or 24th, because nobody has time to run out and eat, and you're eating on the fly because everybody is working their fingers to the bone on that one, and so the pizza counts. Feed your workers. Make sure they eat.
Love it. That's great. That's great. I love it. I so appreciate the two of you being with us today. It's been a total pleasure to speak to the two of you. To the online audience, thank you for being here. If you've not read Amos Parisman, you have until April 12th to get caught up with An Old Man's Name and Reason to Kill, the first two books in the series. The Kindness of Strangers drops on April 12th, event at the store April 14th, if you're lucky enough to be in Northern California. And at least four more coming down the line. So hop on the train.
If he lives that long,
If he lives that long, I'm sure he will. Andy Weinberger, Jude Sales, Readers Books, thank you so much for being here with us. It's a complete pleasure to speak to the two of you. To the online audience, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting independent bookstores. Head over to Readers Books and pick up your copies. We will see you next week. Until then, be well and keep reading.